Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I'd like to welcome you to my tutorial demo for Chapter 19 of the Murach MySQL book, second edition. And Chapter 19 is entitled How to Backup and Restore a Database. In my lecture, I followed the slides in the material in the chapter pretty closely. And those that the material is really useful on a long-term basis in that in order to be a person who's responsible for supervising a production system, one has to know that there have to be scheduled backups, one has to know how to do a restore, one has to know about how to recover the database to a certain point of time and all of that kind of stuff. And the tools that's covered, the tools that are covered in the chapter are primarily the command line tools rather than the graphical user interface version that is available through MySQL Workbench. And I think this is appropriate too, because if you're going to put a system into production, you're probably going to create a number of operating system script files that are going to be run on a regular basis that will do your backups and things like that. And so you're going to be wanting the command line tools. Now, in the near term, in our course, we have a project at the end of the course, and we've got more modest goals. And in particular, we need to come up with we need to implement the design for the database. You've been given the logical design, and you've got to turn that into a physical design and implement that. Okay. And then you need to take that design and create a database. So either you have to know how to write the DDL statements, or you have to use Workbench and do the creation of the design of the database using the diagrammer tool, and then you have to do a forward engineering a transformation where you output a script, okay, for the design. So either way, you have to get the design done, and you need to get the database up. The next thing you have to do is you have to populate the data. Okay, and it's really important to make sure that while you're getting this done, that you are able to back up to certain points. So, for instance, when I had my database defined but no data populated, I probably want to take a backup. Okay, then for me, I find the easiest way to populate the data is to use the tools in Workbench to enter data using the graphical user interface. Other people might find it easier to write scripts with inserts. Either way, okay. So you might get halfway through populating the database and say, well, everything I have so far is good. I want to take another backup. Okay. So you're taking kind of a snapshot of the database halfway populated. And then maybe you get it fully populated and you take another snapshot. And why would you want to do this? Well, here's the use case. Sooner or later, you're going to be working on your project. You're going to say, hey, you know what? I've had a problem since some point in time. What I don't want to do is go all the way back to the point where I don't have any database defined and start from scratch. I'd rather kill myself. Okay, so you can say, well, how far back do I have to go? Well, maybe you have to go back and change the design of the database. Okay, well, then maybe you want to go back to, let's say you use the diagrammer to do it. Well, I'd go back to the diagram that I saved, and I would pretty well go back to the beginning, but I wouldn't start the diagrammer from scratch. I'd have saved some state of that data model in the diagrammer tool in the .nwb file, MWB file. And I would open that up with the modeler, and I would fix it, and then I would forward engineer that into a script, and then I get started again. Okay. Let's say that you've done a pretty good job on your design. Your design's fine, and you want to, and maybe you populated the database well for the first half, but not for the second. Or maybe you completely screwed up populating the database. Pick a backup, go restore it. Restore the version that was just before you began to populate the database. Okay? If you took a backup halfway through, okay, well then you can back up to there and then populate the other half. For my purposes, once I've completely populated the data that I think is going to work for my project, I'm going to want to take a backup then, okay? Because I'm going to want to be able to show that starting with a fresh copy of my populated database, that I can run the scripts that I'm turning in for my project, and when they're run in succession, they get me to the right answers all the way through. Okay. As soon as I get into trouble, I'm going to want to go back and recover to some point. Okay. Now that could be before you start to run the scripts for the project at all, or it could be you take a backup halfway through when you've done some of the scripts, but not all of the scripts. Okay, so you can pick any point, and that becomes the point where you're able to back up and able to rebuild from there. Okay, and so the trick in this case is to learn how to use the backup tool, learn how to use the restore tool, which is just being able to run a script, and then naming your backups in a sufficiently useful way that you can identify the backup points and pick the right one to go back to. So how am I going to simulate this for you? I don't want to do the project because I want you to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that my guitar shop, as a database we work with a lot and we make some changes to, I'm going to pretend that that's our database. Okay, so how could I do this? Well, let's make sure that we're not that we don't have any pre-existing copy of my guitar shop. So I've got workbench up here. I come over to and I have a connection connected. I come over to the Explorer panel over here on the left side, and let's just say, well, I've got a My Guitar Shop schema loaded. Let's right-click and say I want to drop it. And it's going to say drop now? Sure, drop now. Okay, and if I come over here, and even if I refresh, I've got no My Guitar Shop database at all. In your case, when you're working with your project, it'll have the name of the project database, which I recall should be www for Wilma's Wild, Wisconsin, at least in its current incarnation. Okay, so we already have a script that we can use to create that database from scratch. All right. So let's see what that looks like. So we're going to open our script, and see where that script is. Well, I've got one over here in courseware development, and I've got one in MySQL, instructors, my guitar shop exercise starts, create my guitar shop.sql. Open that. Okay, so how was this created? This was created with one of the backup utility programs. Okay, so how do I restore it? I just load the script and execute it. So now it's loaded. Now I use the lightning bolt on the left to execute it. Okay, and looks like all my messages were green. That's good. So I can come over to the panel on the left and refresh my schemas. And there's my guitar shop. Looking good. Okay. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to simulate some work on my guitar shop. Okay, and what would that be? Well, in chapter 5, but in the exercises for chapter 5 for my guitar shop, we learn how to do inserts, updates, and deletes. So why don't we run some of those? Okay, we're going to change the state of the data. All right, so let's do this. Before we start, let's say we've got a pristine copy. Now I just restored that, but let's say that that's not your case. It's always good before you start to come up with a pristine backup copy. Okay, well, how can we do this? Well, we go up to the menu and we can go to Server, Data Export. Okay, now we have to pick the database. In this case, I'm only going to do my guitar shop. Okay, it pre-checks all the schema objects, and I want all of those. Down here, it picked dump both structure and data. I'm going to want that because I not only want the structure of the database, but I want the data. This group of options on objects to export, it turns out that these all relate to features that we haven't used in our course, so we're not going to do those. We've got export to a self-contained file or to a dump project folder. We would like a self-contained file. Okay, we want a script. Okay, so where can I put this? Well, I've been putting the recent ones in a directory over in my courseware development. So why does it do that? Oh, I want to be here. So I can go to courseware development and go to Infos 410, which is my courseware I'm using right here. And I've got I've got DB dumps, and I don't have anything in there right now. Okay, well that's fine. Let's say that we want to call this And I usually start with the name of the database, My Guitar Shop. Okay. And then I'm going to add the date, 2016 08 06. And then I describe the state of the database. Pristine before insert update delete. Okay, so that's what I'm going to call it. Okay, so that's what this is being called. And if you go all the way down, you can see that's what it's calling the file .sql. There's one more thing you have to remember. If you don't check this box for include create schema, you don't get all the instructions that you need. And I find that people hand in work all the time where their database dump doesn't have this. So when they go to run it again, there isn't anything to tell to tell the MySQL server what schema you want to be working on. So include create schema, yes. Okay, so what did we do here? We checked our database. We automatically got checked all of our items. We confirmed that we said dump structure and data. We didn't put anything in this objects to export because these are not features that we're currently using. In the export options, we picked the second one, export self-contained file, and then we pointed it to a directory in our file system that made sense. We gave it a name, which was a combination of the name of the database, the date. Sometimes if I'm doing a lot of these over the course of the day, I'll put the time, although you can often find the timestamp in the file system. So, but I might start to number them. And then there's a description of the state of the database that we are saving. So I'm just going to say start export, and it's going to want the password. I'm not using one. And it has run the backup. Now, it's run the command line tool. It's run MySQL dump. Okay, so you can look right here at how you could have done the same thing at the command line, but this is just a client shell that runs in front of the command line tool. Okay, so that's all done. All right. So why don't we test this? Okay. So to really test this well, okay, to make sure that you've really done it right, go and drop the schema. So go over to the panel, say, I want to drop my guitar shop, whatever the database is you're working with. So now that's gone. All right. So now the question is, can you create a copy of the database from the backup if you didn't have a copy of the database before? That's the big test. Okay, so let's go and find that backup script that we exported. And in here, I have it in my dbdumps subdirectory, my guitar shop, and let's just see, I've got today's date, pristine before insert update delete. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that and say open. Okay, now I know that I check the box for creating the schema because it begins with create database if not exists. Okay, if I hadn't checked that box, it would go right into beginning to do the tables for that database. Well, then that's not going to run, but this one will. So I'm just going to run it. Okay, so it's run I got all green results. Let's go over and restore the schema or refresh the schema. And there's my data. And let's just pick a table like orders and look at the data in the orders table, and that's working just fine. Okay, so that's that's the kind of backup that I want at the very beginning, right? This one, in this case, it has the structure of the database, and of course it's pre-populated to the point that it came from the courseware author. Okay. Now, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to start to work on the scripts that change the database. Okay. So what would they look like? Well, let's go open. And I'm going to go to my courseware development 410 again. And I'm going to find annotated solutions, which is the ones that I've been using. I'm going to pick the one for chapter 5. And I'm going to look at number 1. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got 2 inserts. Okay, so we're adding the category brass to the categories table, and there are 2 versions of this. So we have two possible ways to do it. Well, let's just pick the first one and run it. Okay, I'm sure let's just look at the categories first. So we don't have brass yet. Okay, so let's run the statement. Oh, sorry, I ran the wrong one. I want to run this first part of 501. Okay, insert into. All right, let's come back and look at the categories and give it a refresh. And there's brass right there. Okay, so we made that change. All right, now let's go and look at exercise 2. And what does it do? It's changing category ID 5 in the categories table. It's changing the name to woodwinds. Okay, and what was category ID 5? I think the one that we called brass. Yeah. So now we're going to try to change that to woodwinds. Let's see how that goes. Run it. And it says one row was affected. And let's refresh the look. And now it says woodwinds. That's going well. Now let's just go to the number 3. Okay. And we're going to delete category 5. Okay. Now that's going to change the state of the database, but that's okay. Okay, fine. So we run this. All right. So let's say, okay, let's say we're looking at this and go, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to get that delete to work right the first time, and I'd like to be able to back up to right at this point, and so how do we do that? Well, I can do another backup. So I can just, before I run that delete, I can say, go up to the menu, click on Server, Data Export. We want to export my guitar shop, all the objects, dump structure and data. Don't worry about these optional objects. And let's go to this place where we are. So when I said I wanted to pick a file, it had suggested one. And I don't want to go to its suggested place. I want to go back to where I was. So courseware development and DB dumps. And let's see. I've got the right name except for the description. So let's change the description of here. Okay. I say something like inserts made inserts made and delete, and I might say something, and ready for delete. Okay. Let's call it that. And somehow we got out of our little window here. Save that. And include create schema. Can't forget that. Start the export. And the export range is fine. Okay. So now, let's go back. I've got a way to get back to where I was after EX 5-02. Sometimes I'll use that as the description. Okay. So let's go to 503. Okay. Let's run this. Okay. Run OK. The delete. Let's go back and look at categories. Refresh it. And that fifth category is now gone. Okay. And now let's say that we want to practice that again. Okay. Let's say that we did the delete, but we didn't get what we wanted. We deleted the wrong. We did the wrong row. Okay. So how do we go back? Well, we just go to our dumps and pick the right one. So we go to open a script. Do I want the pristine before the insert, update, and delete? No, I don't want that. I want the inserts made and ready for delete. Just where I want to go. Highlight that. Open it. Run it. Okay, let's go back to categories and see the state that categories is in. Categories is just where it was before we did the delete. Okay. So what I want you to do while you're working on your project is to create as many as these snapshot backups as you need to get yourself through your workflow. Okay. And then before you hand in your project, okay, make sure that you can run the thing from beginning to end. So go back to the one you have at the very beginning of your workflow. So you might close all these things, right? Say, okay, I want to make sure that I can run this from beginning to end, because that's what the instructor is going to do when she or he grades it. Okay, so let's open. Okay, and we've got the pristine one. Okay, and we open it and we run it. Okay. And everything's fine. And let's just go take a look at the, let's update this. And let's go down and look at categories again. And it's just got the original 4 categories. So we did get back to the pristine state. And then we should be able to run every one of the scripts that you are submitting as part of your project. and you should have the database in the right state after each one. If in fact you made a mistake, and let's say you counted on a hard-coded key, like you counted on deleting category ID 5, okay? But it turns out that in the sequence of scripts that you have now, that's the wrong category ID. Then you're going to have a problem. Then you're going to have to go back and change things. Okay, so the final test is start with the pristine version of the database with the database defined and it completely populated, and then you should be able to run your scripts one after the next, after the next, after the next, all the way to the end, and you should always have the database in the proper state when you're done, and you shouldn't have any problems where you're trying to delete key 5 when it's really key 4 now. All right? Then you're done. Okay? So this backup and restore, the capabilities are pretty easy to use when you remember where to find them in the graphical user interface. But what I think is really challenging is having a concept of taking these snapshots at the proper place such that while you're developing your solution, you can always back up just far enough without having to go too far, okay? Because you don't want to have to rerun things from the beginning every time. So I could see how you might have an assortment of snapshots all the way through your workflow. But then when you're done, you're only going to hand in the pristine snapshot of the database. So you have to say, well, what's the instructor going to do? Well, the instructor is going to run that restore on the pristine state of the database, and then they're going to run script 1, script 2, script 3, script 4, script 5, and the database ought to be in the proper state after each one. It's only when you've tested all that that you're done. Okay? And make sure before you go and restore things that you drop the schema. That will keep you from having the problem that you accidentally forgot to ask it to generate a create schema statement. Because if you drop the schema, then when you go back to, and then you don't create your script the right way, when you run the script, it'll go, this is interesting, but I don't know what schema this is for. So that's it for this tutorial demo. This can save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache, and I'm hoping it's going to save you both. So best of luck with that, and I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.